Welcome into Basketball by Association, little BbA action for you to start your week. My name is Arky. That is Mr. Joel C. Cortez. Joel, hello, good sir.
Today is episode 57, and last week we joked about the Pickens being slim. Only 3 players had ever worn number 56. This week is going to be an incredibly simple choice because only one player in NBA history, oddly enough, has ever worn the number 57, and they wore it for one single season. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think of, just how many players have passed through the league through so many years. But this, by default, get excited, people. This is the Hilton Armstrong episode. One season with the Golden State Warriors in 2014. And I think what's going to happen, we're going to get to some numbers here in the future that just nobody has ever worn, oddly enough. In that case, we may just pick like that year. And so if it's, episode 68 or something crazy, we'll just pick whoever stands out from the year 1968. But for right now, we still have a choice. And we're locked into this arbitrary rule we made for ourselves. So Hilton Armstrong, this one's for you, sir.
Wonder what Hilton Armstrong's even doing right now. Let me see if I can find him real quick. Hilton Armstrong.
It's worth the Google.
By the way, his middle name's Julius. How about that?
And I do remember actually when he was drafted, 2006. He was drafted by New Orleans. It was when they were in Oklahoma City. There was actually pretty high expectations for him, and somehow he did manage to kind of bounce around in the league for 7 seasons.
Oh, let me tell you how. So from New Orleans, OKC, he went in the same year to Sacramento, then Houston, then Washington. Then finished in Washington, went to Atlanta, and then he was out of the league.
For a couple of years,
for a little bit. Then he went to ASVEL basketball, commonly known as ASVEL Lyon Villeurbanne in France. Then went to Panathinaikos, BC, which I think is in Greece. That
is Greece, and you absolutely butchered that name, but I don't know how to spell it correct either, so I can't really correct you.
Then the next year he went to, I know this one, to the Santa Cruz Warriors. The G League for the Golden State Warriors, where he then finished 2013. 2014, back on the G League Warriors, and then back with Golden State for a biscuit or so. And then the next
15 games he played.
Then the next year he goes to Beşiktaş basketball in Turkey. Then in 2015 he started the year with
Just give us the country. Just tell us the country he played in.
Why? That's not nearly as fun. Also in Turkey. Then he went to more Turkey teams. And then he went to a Japanese basketball team known as the Chiba Jets. And then he went to an Okinawa team called the Ryukyu Golden Kings.
Which would also, be in the Japanese Pro League.
Then he went to Israel to play for Bnei Herzliya.
Yeah. So, I mean, dude's gotten to travel the world quite a bit.
For real. And then he finished his career last year with the Nagoya Diamond Dolphins in Japan. So, it's strange. I've always found it fascinating. Guys who we look at like washouts here that can make a significant amount of money and still playing the game they love for a long time just overseas. And this dude, listen, it was nothing in the NBA, right? Let's just be as fair as possible.
Let me say this. Nothing is depending on how you look at it, because this isn't the guy who had a cup of coffee in the NBA, right? 7 seasons and 292 games appeared in. There's plenty of players who never even got that far along. It's an interesting conversation with that. Now, granted, as the number 12 pick, bigger things were expected. But
he basically got to double his career because he played overseas and
probably played bigger minutes and made more money in his time overseas as well. And exactly like you said, he got to take the entirety of a career span, even though that may be 10, 15 years if you're really lucky, but still got to play basketball for 10 or 15 years. That's nothing to shake a stick at.
No, so if you can live that dream for a long, long time,
and see the world too, that's not bad.
God bless you. Those are some fine places to see, by the way. Being able to go to Israel and Turkey and to go to Japan, and not the worst way to go.
France,
let's start this podcast, or let's continue it with a little less Hilton Armstrong talk. And I'd like to lead.
Do we have to?
I'd like to lead the show specifically about maybe what was just the game of the year we've seen so far with the Celtics and the Warriors. Before we get to the specifics of it, did you get to watch the majority of that game?
I did not this weekend. There was some bigger personal things that occurred. However,
we'll go back and
I was able to go back today and watch through the replay of it. So I have seen it. I didn't get the opportunity to see it live, unfortunately.
Did you get the feeling that like this was a game of the year candidate so far? Like this was a really fun game from beginning to end, and that was something I wasn't necessarily expecting going into it, because I thought Boston was stronger. I bet on the -4 and over the total 227. Both hit, by the way. You're welcome. But I thought with Golden State being a little down, the one thing I was concerned about was Steph Curry going ape. And he did go ape in that game. But did you get the feeling watching that game that it felt like a game of the year that we've seen so far, like a candidate for that? Because it certainly felt like that, especially with two big stars going toe-to-toe with each other.
Yeah, it was absolutely fun. And sometimes you get games of that fun level, even if the talent level, you get two bad teams that just give you a whale of a game on any night. That's possible. But it certainly ups it when you have star quality talent, like you said, in this case, superstars. And it ups it when both teams are, they're playing for something. There's a lot on the line playoff wise, even if they're in separate conferences. Just to pour a tiny bit of cold water on the grand scheme of things, people are like, oh, Boston, it's the win of the year and that sort of thing. And, oh, they're rolling. And it's like, okay, that's true. That's good. Any win that you can get in the NBA is worth tipping your cap to. But at the same time, if you're the Boston Celtics, you should beat the Golden State Warriors. You're the fifth seed in the Eastern Conference. You've been up higher and lower at certain points of the year, but you're 5 games over 500 now with the win. On the flip side, Golden State has been a 500 or worse team all year and has not been in the top 8. And I think if they did, it was very, very briefly. Like, they've been out of the picture just barely all season long. So Golden State is the type of team that you are supposed to beat. And the Warriors did not have Kelly Oubre. They don't have James Wiseman. But then again, on the other side, Boston Celtics didn't have Jaylen Brown, didn't have Evan Fournier, didn't have Robert Williams III. So both teams were kind of coming into it a little bit decimated in their starting 5. But you still got, an absolute whale of a game. And you got to see Curry and Tatum at their absolute best. You saw other guys chip in. Draymond Green, I thought, had a really fantastic game moving the ball, anchoring the defense. Andrew Wiggins had some really nice offensive plays. On the Celtics side, Kemba Walker had a very effective game, and Marcus Smart hit some big shots for them down the stretch too. So, it was fun. You got to see both teams kind of what they bring to the table and on a national stage. And I'll say this, the other national game yesterday too, Utah and LA, another game where both teams were definitely shorthanded. Utah doesn't have Donovan Mitchell because of the ankle injury, which I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit. Rudy Gobert sat for rest purposes. The Lakers obviously are still out with no LeBron, no Anthony Davis. And yet, despite that, a little bit of a skeleton crew field, that game was back and forth the whole time. You had Joe Ingles hitting big shots for Utah. On the LA side, you had a really nice game from Montrezl Harrell. And Drummond was very solid. 2 other guys stepped up. I saw Caruso and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope hit some big shots. Kyle Kuzma had a couple good moments. So just fun basketball on the national TV games. That's what you want if you're going to sit down on a Sunday, or even like me on a Monday, go back and rewatch them. You want your money's worth, and I think we got our money's worth from those matchups.
Yeah, and listen, I want to dovetail, because we were starting to talk about is what I want to dovetail into the Celtics talk. But Kentavious Caldwell-Pope had a great game. I mean, that dude put up 25 points. He was clutch for that team when they needed him to be clutch. When there was a point in that game where the Lakers were just they're killing Utah. They're killing them by I think like 13. And at one point, I think it was a 15-0 run that I think Utah went on in the middle of the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
that the Lakers looked like they were just going to be dead in the water, like they just could not stop Utah's run.
And then it gets to overtime, and you saw the Lakers having a little bit more depth.
Yes, you did.
I think a little more juice to get past it, and you saw just how important not having Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert is for Utah.
Very, 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 very big for them. And Hubie Brown brought it up on the broadcast. Like they couldn't get a good look at the at the end of the fourth quarter and overtime. Like it was just contested shot after contested shot after contested shot, and not even like slightly contested, like smothered contested shot. They didn't look good. Like they didn't have a spark when they sort of needed it, or somebody to get a shot when they needed to get a shot at the very end of that game.
It brings up one of the ongoing concerns for Utah, in that Donovan Mitchell is the engine that makes the offense go. But Mike Conley is super important to them. He didn't play yesterday as well. He's a guy who at least can create something. But outside of those two guys, you have Jordan Clarkson coming off the bench, and he definitely is a spark plug, but it's usually a spark plug for himself. Like he's a fantastic shot hunter and shot maker. He doesn't necessarily make guys around him better. He stepped up. He'd been injured for a while. He had 27 points, hit some really big shots, but it was on 27 shots. And then you look around at the rest of Utah and you go, okay, Bogdanovich is a shot maker. There's no question about it. But does he really manufacture offense, or does he benefit from someone else manufacturing it for him? The answer is both. Joe Ingles is a guy who manufactures offense for others. He's kind of Draymond Green-ish on the offensive end in that way. And he had a nice game, 20 points, 14 assists. But when crunch time came down and things tightened up, there you saw the limitations of a Joe Ingles or a Bojan Bogdanovic, where the defense locked up. They could not get their own shot. And I think that is going to be the potential Achilles heel of, if you shut down Donovan Mitchell in a playoff game, and it's not a night where a 36-year-old Mike Conley can pick up the slack, Utah becomes vulnerable that way. Like Ersan Ilyasova, they dusted off the scrap heap. He hit 6 threes in the first quarter and was unconscious. Didn't hit another 3 the rest of the game. And Royce O'Neal, you look and you go, he had a really nice game, but 14 points? And they got 15 points total off the bench. So it does speak to the fact that Utah is good enough to go toe-to-toe with people, but there is a blueprint there for how to beat that team if they can't lock up defensively their own.
All right, so I want to go back to the Celtics game for just a minute, just because I don't want that game to get lost in what we were speaking of, because that game, I think for me, what I have seen, that's the best individual game of the year that I've been able to watch that did involve my Knicks, who, by the way, just another win on the board.
They're doing some things.
Just saying.
Some things are being done.
Julius, no one wants to give him credit. Randall out there just putting up more points. I think he went 1 of 7 from 3, but that's not his game.
Don't look now, but New York is 1 game out of 4th place and hosting a playoff series and avoiding a matchup with, the upper crust of the Eastern Conference in the first round. And I think if you're in New York, that's very much what you want, is to get out of this season, avoid the play-in tournament if you can, but to get out of the season, not only a playoff appearance, but if you can win a first-round series, that is a monumental success to build off of.
I do enjoy the first 13 minutes of it. Let's talk about the Celtics game and not get to the Celtics game.
Sorry.
I brought up the Knicks. That's my fault. But anyway, you can have Zion all you want. We got Julius Randle and Emmanuel Quick. That's all we need. And Derrick Rose, who's clutch. Derrick Rose hitting the game. Forget it. I'm going to get Knicks later. The Celtics and Warriors, toe-to-toe. Jason Tatum unconscious last night. So was Steph Curry. Steph Curry's been unconscious for 2 weeks. He is on some kind of ridiculous tear right now.
Right.
You don't even know what to do with.
He's been unconscious for 10 years, really, but yeah.
But this most recent stretch of games is just kind of stupid. And you basically should bet the over Steph Curry points every single time because
I am glad he's on my fantasy team. He was my first round pick this year, and I was hoping for a resurrection year, and he has delivered in spades.
he has delivered, and this last couple of weeks has been phenomenal for him. He does the crazy shot that sort of he goats the foul, puts up the one-handed bucket, and that gets you the and one. But he hit the entire night from everywhere on the court, from everywhere.
And it doesn't matter what the defense is doing. I saw great defense played by Peyton Pritchard, by Marcus Smart, whoever they rotated on. You know, I saw times where like Grant Williams got rotated onto him, and you're like, okay, that's a dude with longer arms at least. Maybe he's got a shot. Nope, doesn't matter. Like, it does not matter. The off-balance three, especially from the wings, was really rolling for Steph.
Yeah, like he'll look double covered and just take like a bounce step to the left and just be able to put up a shot that's kind of open. You're like, wow, that's stupid. I don't know how you're able to do that. But again, anyway, he's been phenomenal. That's as much praise as I'm willing to give Golden State right now, because I do want to discuss what Boston has done recently. And a lot of this without Evan Fournier, who was brought in to be some extra scoring help on that offense because he's been out with COVID-19. This team is very, very warm right now. We mentioned that the road for them was going to get a little tougher, and their schedule was going to get a little tougher when they went out west. So they did beat the Knicks, and that was a nice win. What we're talking about like a week and a half ago. Then the Timberwolves, but then they went to Denver and won that game. They won in Portland. It was, by the way, a very heads-up way to end that game. Did you see the breakdown of the final free throws and the blocking out of the free throws and in the?
I actually did get to see that game as it happened.
Yeah, very heady play and very heady call for Brad Stevens. Then they beat the Lakers, a little undermanned, but they still beat the Lakers. And Jaylen Brown goes nuts in that game. He doesn't play yesterday, but Jason Tatum plays, and he goes nuts against the Warriors as they come back home. That tougher road stretch that they had, now coming back home when it's going to be a little interesting. The road still gets kind of harder, but this team's kind of finding a groove right now. And what we've sort of waited on, which is not the stop and startness of Boston, but the fact that they can finally get into some kind of groove, seems to start happening. It's starting to happen right now.
Absolutely. And Brad Stevens pointed it out, we pointed it out a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the Evan Fournier arrival. Part of it is getting healthy. It cannot be understated how important Marcus Smart is to them defensively, because it allows then Jaylen Brown to not have to concentrate so much on defense while being such an integral offensive part. When Jaylen Brown has a little more juice, it gives Jason Tatum a little more juice to just go out and be the flame-throwing scorer that he is. When Kemba Walker is right enough to be a threat, which he has been now for weeks, and really it's been months at this point, but when Kemba Walker is an offensive threat and keeps a defense honest, it opens things up for Smart to get some easy shots here or there, which he will make, for Tatum and Brown to do their thing. It also offsets the fact that Kemba Walker is a liability on defense at this point in his career. He always was kind of a borderline guy. Even against Golden State, he was just +3 while on the floor. But you will take +3, right?
Yeah.
You'll take that. And as long as he's not a minus when he's out there, and he's usually going to have to overcome it with his shot making and then just easing things up for everybody else, that's what you want to see. Now, no Evan Fournier off the bench is a tough one for a second unit that has struggled to score all season. But they signed Jabari Parker off the scrap heap, the former number 2 pick, who is just 26 years old. He had 11 points in 16 minutes. And there again is another guy that not a good defender, not always a great rebounder as well, but he is a shot maker. And if he can be a plus when he's on the floor overall and just give you somebody in that second unit that can make a basket when you need it, that's all they need. And when you add Evan Fournier into that mix as a guy who's a little more multifaceted once they get him back healthy, and you've got Peyton Pritchard, who's shown he can just be heady at making the right plays. Grant Williams is another heady guy like Pritchard that it's not going to show up in the box score what they do, but they can be a plus as long as you are not asking them to do too much and go outside of that comfort zone. Even like, they didn't have Robert Williams III. So who steps up? Tristan Thompson played 28 minutes. Statistically, didn't do a whole lot, but he did enough. The trade that brings in Luke Cornett, that doesn't seem like much, but he's a 7-footer who can occasionally hit a 3. He didn't do that in 6 minutes against Golden State. But that was the role that like Daniel Tice played before that. Tice was a screen setter who could hit a 3, but he was undersized. Well, now you put Tristan Thompson into the starting lineup or Robert Williams III when healthy, and we know like he's an X-factor guy. He's athletic. He can finish above the rim, good shot blocker, all that stuff. But Tristan Thompson can give you some of the rebounding and screen setting that Tice did. But when you need somebody to step in and give you a little stretchiness with a certain lineup, Luke Cornett can fill that in limited. So, yeah, so it just comes down to what we talked about at the trade deadline. Boston would look better, conceivably, when they figured out their roster a little better and allowed people to slide into roles that they were able to fill, and you got rid of the glut at guards, you brought in a few more wings and forwards that could actually produce, and when you got healthy with Marcus Smart returning. As those things have happened, it's turned out pretty much exactly like we said.
So their next 3 games, at home against Chicago on Monday night, Thursday at home against Phoenix, and then Friday at Brooklyn. The one thing about Kemba is that right now I shouldn't say right now, we're at the end of the season, but he's not been playing back-to-back on back-to-back nights. And that Brooklyn game would be the second night of a back-to-back. They have 3 more of those the rest of the season. My assumption would be is that if they needed him, he would in the because the last 4 games of the season are on back-to-back nights. Mm-hmm. So there's a back-to-back and then another back-to-back. If they can sort of get to the 4 spot and feel comfortable toward the end of the season not playing Kemba, then I think if you're Boston, you've got to like your chances to be able to get past the first round, right? Like you because if it's a 4-5 and them and the Knicks are the 2 hottest teams in the East right now. Like if it's a 4-5, you in New York or you in Charlotte or whoever, or you in Atlanta, like you've got to like your chances to be able to get through.
No, absolutely. And I think that's got to be everybody's goal right now of those aforementioned 3 teams. Get the 4th seed, right? Avoid a first-round matchup with Philadelphia, Milwaukee, or Brooklyn, and give yourself a chance to win that first round. You never know what happens. You never know if you get hot and one of those top 3 teams suffers a significant injury. All you can do is give yourself that chance to keep playing, and that's what getting the 4 or 5 seed really is. You got to like Boston's chances in that case. You got to like New York's chances. You like Atlanta's chances. I think it's going to be a puncher's chance for any of those teams to win a series, regardless of what the seeding is. I have a feeling that unless a playoff seed is at stake, like if it's a difference between the 4 and the 5, Boston won't care. If a playoff seed between the 4th and the 6th or 4th and the 7th is at stake, maybe you do see Kemba play on that back-to-back. But that game against Brooklyn on a back-to-back night late in the season, if there's nothing at stake, I think that's going to be the classic white flag game where not only Kemba rests, but magically Jason Tatum has like a sore ankle and, Jaylen Brown has a sore neck and those guys sit. And all of a sudden, Boston trots out its second unit and goes, yeah, if you beat us, Brooklyn, congratulations.
Right.
It's that classic type of game then.
Okay, well then, that dovetails nicely to a story I wanted to get to, but let's go ahead.
It would. Yep.
Let's go ahead and mention it. The Spurs were fined $25,000 for on Saturday night, resting 3 players.
Healthy players. Yep.
3 healthy players in the same road game against Phoenix. And I keep going back to like, that's fine and all, and that's a small amount of money, but they won. Like, here's the thing. Like, I'll never truly understand this rest rule completely. Like, I understand of like, you're keeping
very arbitrary when they apply it,
exactly right. And San Antonio seems to be hitting I think Greg Popovich has a personal beef with Adam Silver or something because of this rule, because it really is the San Antonio Spurs rule. So shouldn't you take that penalty off if you win right? Like if you lose and like Phoenix beat you by 30 because you rested 3 starters, I get it. But like you killed Phoenix last night. Like that game was never in question. Phoenix just did not have it last night.
And what's hypocritical is that all season long, because of COVID, because of tighter schedules, and it just being a wacky year, as we've spoken about, lineups have been in flux all season. You never get the best. You never get the best unit.
So what do you even do with this? Like, I feel like the NBA wrote this without seeing the final score. Like, I feel like they probably were like, oh, they did that against Phoenix. Phoenix probably beat them by 100. Okay, we got to put a fine down on them. Unless it literally is like Greg Popovich did it, then Greg Popovich has to get punished.
Here is how you would solve this issue in a heartbeat. And I can't believe that I didn't think of it earlier than like an hour ago when I was kind of prepping and figuring you would ask about this topic. By the way, listeners, just so you know out there, Arky and I rarely coordinate on topics before the show. Every once in a while we do, but it's kind of a fun game just to see like who comes up with what and just to keep us on our toes. But I figured you would bring this one up, and I was thinking about it, and all of a sudden the light bulb went on. Why do let's backtrack here for a minute. Why do they make the fine? They make the fine because conceivably, if you are fans of the Phoenix Suns and you pay money to go to that Phoenix Suns game, or if you are the televised sponsors and you pay ad money for said game, you want the best possible product. And if I pay for overpriced NBA tickets to go to a game and I don't get to see each team's best, I'm going to feel cheated. That's what we're trying to avoid. And it's a reasonable, I think, it's a reasonable goal to shoot for. So the rule is supposed to be that if you're going to rest your guys like that, they either need to have some sort of health issue. And now what happens is teams just make up health issues and they rest. They San Antonio's mistake was that they didn't lie. They didn't make up some fraudulent thing. They didn't lie. They just said it was rest. And their mistake was they did it on the road. If you do it at home, the fines typically don't happen. But here, my friend, is how you would solve the issue. Instead of making an arbitrary $25,000 fine that goes to charity, which is great, have the team that was the offender issue a partial refund to everybody who paid for tickets to go to that game. Set what the number is, make it according to a number of players sat and number of minutes that said player normally fills. So you're going to need a math equation here. You're going to need some algebra going on. Because, if the 13th guy doesn't play, nobody cares, right? But if LeBron doesn't play, then they care. So you attach a modifier, a rate to a player's number and how many players sat. And if you are sitting healthy players like that, you have to pay money into a pot that goes as a partial ticket refund to those who paid money to go to the game, and maybe even a small partial refund to the advertisers. I guarantee you, Arky Shea, that would solve the problem immediately, insofar at least that teams would figure out how to lie better instead of telling the truth.
Yeah, the whole thing that bugs my mind, especially because not only did San Antonio win, and that sort of negates for me the reason to have it, because doesn't one guy know the team better than anybody else? That's the guy coaching it in the whole point to win.
Here's the thing: but, how many people paid to go to the Phoenix Suns? Going, no, I really need to see DeMar DeRozan tonight.
That's exactly right. If you're a Phoenix Suns fan, you saw Chris Paul, you saw DeAndre Ayton, you saw
Devin Booker.
You mad you didn't see Patty Mills? Like, are you mad DeMar DeRozan? Like you're mad you lost, but are you mad you didn't see DeMar DeRozan and Patty Mills? No,
maybe like one or two people, right?
Yeah, one or two happens to be in the neighborhood Spurs fans. Like, oh man, I get to see the Spurs finally. Yeah. Where's Patty Mills?
Right.
Like, it's not the same Spurs team. People have got to maybe Adam Silver doesn't know that. Maybe Adam Silver doesn't know that Kawhi Leonard's not still on the team.
Right. Timmy D and Ginobili and Parker aren't playing.
Yeah, because the level of dude that we're talking about here that sat is completely different than what I feel like that warrants a penalty like that.
Right.
Now, if you just want to donate the $25,000 to charity, do that. Right? Just say, okay, for every player we sit tonight, we'll donate $15,000 or something.
And that's where I think too, you would have to assign it to number of players and whether, like, how many all-star you're talking about here, like past or present. Like, you have to assign it to a certain level of player, which again is unfair, but I guess that's the burden of fame and talent and stardom, because my friend, you're also the one making boatloads of money compared to everyone else. So if you sit, you are the person that people paid to come see. And if that didn't happen, like, just refund people some of their ticket money. If you're truly that worried about it, teams would clean up this practice real fast.
Oh man, like you imagine owners coming into like a coach's office, like, okay, listen, I realize we want to win, and that's the thing. Like, we want to rest some guys, but I'm not interested in paying Smoothie King a couple million back. So if you'd like to, take a look at this thing and maybe just put them in for a few minutes.
Exactly.
That really helps us out.
Play the guy for 10 minutes that night, and what can be said, right? Then it's coach's decision. Or do what every other team in the league is doing and go, his ankle is sore. Chances are his ankle probably is sore. We're at game, 50, 60 something in the course of an NBA season, and every part of your body is beat up at that point. Like, you're not really lying to go, Patty Mills' back is tight right now, he's not going to play today. Like, just do that. I think when you talk about the Spurs and you talk about like Popovich kind of having a thing with Silver and vice versa, maybe the fine comes from the fact that the Spurs did thumb their nose again, where they go, we're not even going to say he's hurt. We're just doing it. Screw you guys. Here's $25,000 and the charity. And that's when the NBA steps in, because it has been a battle of wills on this one for a while.
Well, I'm looking at the injury report for Sunday's games, right? And it's a lot of just like right knee soreness. DeAndre Hunter, he's out. And you're like, oh, okay.
Well, Hunter actually had surgery, so he probably is sore. But yeah.
But I was going to go up in the or go down in the severity, right? Like so that makes sense. For example, who was it? Let me just read it from LaMarcus Aldridge, out, not with team, right? Like,
well, he retired.
Right. So like there's a level that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then there literally is just a lot of guys who are just like, slight soreness. Sterling Brown for the Rockets, soreness. By the way, no one's playing for the Rockets on Sunday. If you just want to look at it, like,
well, they're tanking for a draft pick hard at this point.
They're all out, but no one's resting. They all have soreness.
Kyrie Irving out, hurt feelings, right? Like,
yes,
yes. You allow players to walk out for personal reasons, and to a point, we can all agree that that's relevant, right? You're able to take a sick day at your job at times, or take a personal day. Most people, like, as long as you're not hourly, and most jobs like allow that to some extent, you can do that. So for the NBA to have that within reason for personal days is fine. So to even have a rest day here or there, attach it to some reason for the rest, right? Tell me that his back is sore and I'll go, yeah, okay, fine, do whatever. But if it's just rest and you are the Spurs thumbing your nose at it, that's when it gets a little ridiculous.
I wanted to mention that the Lakers, who were on a East Coast trip coming up, they were going, or will be on an East Coast trip coming up. They said they are not going to go to the White House for a celebration when they come to take on the sweet Wizards later this month. Apparently, there's some scheduled issues and COVID-19 protocols are going to prevent that. Right. They haven't ruled out a visit sort of in the future, but I feel like this is one of those I'm okay with, because it's, the spot in the season we're talking about is so close to sort of the end of the season that you kind of need to, I don't want to say just focus, but like, let's just play hoops for a little while. Let's get everybody healthy. Like, the extracurricular stuff for me, I think I understand even more so adding that on top of the other slight restrictions is why the Lakers wouldn't visit DC.
And let's just be honest here, regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum, we all know why the NBA champions over the past 4 years were not going to the White House. Regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum and who you vote for, the NBA and the Donald Trump administration did not see eye to eye. Let's just put it nicely that way. Okay, sure. So there was a boycott there. Really, it became a two-sided boycott, and that is what it is. That era is past, and so there's the possibility of teams going again. But you're right. The way the season falls this year, a lot of times these visits happened like after the season was done, not during the season, and occasionally it would. There's really been no like set protocol of when champions go to the White House.
Right, like the last one was LeBron's Cavs, who went in November of 2016. Yeah. And that's like, I mean, that's super, super, super early season kind of stuff.
Right.
Like that's,
and you don't have a pandemic going on and whatever. So
yeah, because LeBron was asked about that before, and he said it would be great if we went to the White House. I just don't know how feasible it is because of the pandemic.
Right, and the tenor around everything has changed. So it's not surprising that the door is open now. It's not surprising that that they would choose not to. I don't really think it's a huge deal either way. I do think it is, when you stop and think about it, it's a little bit silly. It's a cool tradition, but it's kind of a silly tradition too. Like, hey, we won this national sports championship. Now we show up at the White House for one of 1,000 ceremonies that they do there. And I guess it's cool if you've like never been to the White House before, for some of the players to be like, oh yeah, this is my first time here. This is really sweet. Oh, I got to meet the president. When do you say you get to do that? But if you're LeBron James, like, how cool is it anymore when you've been there like multiple times? And especially like, I mean, if you're a big fan of whoever's president at that time, then you might be like, oh yeah, it's sweet to meet him. But you're of such a stature, if you're LeBron James, that you probably will meet that president at some point anyway.
And they keep buying ownership in all these teams, sure.
Right. If you really don't care who the president is, or especially if you're like, yeah, I don't really like that guy or like what he stands for, is it really like that important or that big of a deal where you look forward to it? It's just always struck me as kind of an odd tradition, but so it to me personally, it doesn't matter whether it gets resurrected or not, but we all know why it stopped for those 4 years.
Sure. It was
contentious, to put it nicely.
17, 18, 19, and 20. There were none of the visits, and now 21. There still may not be a visit, but who knows at this point, because the season is now expanded a little bit in a different way, and pandemic and all. But all right, I want to end on a topic that I find extremely fascinating. That's your 2021 Washington Wizards, Joel Cordes.
We have to talk about LaMarcus Aldridge retiring at some point, but let's talk about the Wizards.
All right. Let's
talk Wizards. That's fine.
I thought LaMarcus Aldridge retired like a year ago, but that's fine. Technically still. Okay, we'll end with LaMarcus Aldridge, but we'll start this ending with the Washington Wizards, who are extremely fascinating to me. They are winners of 4 in a row, and they have won against some good opponents. And they have had some really nice outputs now that we can see. And when we do get to see them together, Bradley Beal and Russ Westbrook, those two guys can kind of do damage together. So my question for you is not how awesome are the Wizards, because they're really fun to watch offensively at times.
They're the worst defensive team in the league, but offensively, yes, very fun to watch.
They are tied with the Chicago Bulls for the last spot in the play-in tournament. Can the Washington Wizards find themselves technically in the playoffs in the next few weeks? Because I think they do.
Yes, especially because Toronto is starting to pack it in, and they're only a half game behind Washington, but Toronto has had so many injuries. And just the other day rested Kyle Lowry and Pascal Siakam for really no reason, it sounds like. And they got fined too, by the way. So I don't think Toronto is pushing very hard. And Washington, who is 6-4 in their last 10, is out of that group the only one playing above 500 basketball. Charlotte and Chicago are both under 500 in their last 10. Indiana sitting right at 500. So momentum is there, and I think by default, you will see Washington get in, and it is a nice story. And I will say this, like Washington, the first couple games of the season, before Thomas Bryant went down with his knee injury, which just put a huge damper on things. And then shortly thereafter, it was the musical chairs of Russ and or Beal always being out. You never got both of them together after that point. But for those first few games when Thomas Bryant was there as like the short corner finisher, the kind of the Clint Capella to what Russell Westbrook had in Houston, Washington did look really good. Like the tandem really worked, and Bryant looked really good, and like he was going to be a double guy for them. And you go, okay, there's 3 core guys, and if you can get something out of Denny Avdia, their rookie, and if Rui Hachimura, who's a second-year player, if those 2 guys just, again, are at least dead even while on the court and kind of get their sea legs, you could talk me into, back at that point, Washington having been a playoff team pretty easily. But then the injuries piled up, and Davis Bertans has never been back consistently and has looked really off when he has been back. That should have been their 6th-man flamethrower guy. They've had a rotating door at center of Robin Lopez, who should not be a starting center in the league anymore, even though he's serviceable as a backup for sure. Alex Len, a guy they picked up off the scrap heap. Now they get Daniel Gafford from the Chicago Bulls as part of the trade deadline trade, and he's had some injury issues, so hasn't gotten to play a lot. But when Gafford has been in, he's filled a lot of that athletic 5-man stuff that you saw with Thomas Bryant, and all of a sudden Gafford looks pretty good, and the rest of the Wizards do too. So it's kind of in a weird way, almost like Boston, where you just didn't have guys filling the roles that they should have, and other guys being asked to do way too much. And suddenly when you get healthy and you see guys slotting into the roles that were initially envisioned, you go, that's not a bad basketball team, even if they can't defend a parking cone.
Well, there's a lot of moving parking cones playing in the NBA, so that might be an issue.
Don't do Luke Cornett like that.
Oh, I got to do Luke like that. But okay, so they got 16 games left, right? And I told you they're tied for the last spot to get into the play-in tournament. Mm-hmm. But I think what's also fascinating is that if you want to look at them getting into the current 8 seed right now, and that would be the last traditional playoff spot, that's 4.5 games. And if they want to be safe, there's 7 games. Let's just play this out for just a second, okay? 16 games left. Here's how feasible their schedule is. 2 of the next 3 are against the Thunder. 1 of those is against the Warriors. Mm-hmm. Then they have the Cavaliers, Spurs, Lakers, Cavs again, Mavericks, Pacers, Bucks, Raptors, Pacers, Hawks for back-to-back, and then Cavs, Hornets.
Doable.
It's doable, right?
It is doable. Here's the
maybe
one...
not to get the number 6 spot, but maybe.
Yeah.
It's a doable schedule.
It is not out of the realm of possibility. The one caveat is how maddeningly inconsistent Washington has been, because they have been one of those teams all year that goes into a game against somebody like Houston or Orlando, or those games that they're just supposed to win and they just don't, and they play like garbage that night. They have had way too many of those all year. Now, granted, we talk all the health issues and that sort of thing, but even despite all that, they've been maddeningly inconsistent, because some of those games came against teams that were as decimated as they were, and it was an even playing field. Or Washington, even despite their health issues, should have had the upper hand on paper and just didn't take advantage of it. So, yeah, Washington can do it. There's momentum behind it. I'm not going to sign off on it and say, yeah, they've got an open road. There are definitely some games in there that they're going to be up against decent teams, and some nights where I think the Wizards' inconsistency will just show out. And that is, too, where I think Washington is supremely dangerous in a play-in tournament type of thing, where it's a single game, because I do think they can beat just about anybody on a given night. Can they get 4 wins out of 7? I don't see that out of this Wizards team. I don't see them as a team that gets a first-round win regardless of matchup. I don't think they're consistent enough to do that, even with Russ and Brad.
Yeah, they might be able to scare a couple offensively. It just it will, like that. Russ and Beal can get nasty for a game or 2.
I saw them beat Utah in a game where Utah was basically fully healthy, and Washington just, those 2 guys, Russ especially, had a phenomenal game, and Utah, one of the best teams in the league, had no answer for it. They could not stop them.
All right, so let's finish this thing off with LaMarcus Aldridge, who's 35 years old, and he is now retiring from the National Basketball Association of America and in our hearts. And he said after he played with the Nets against the Lakers last Saturday, he experienced an irregular heartbeat during that game, and then his condition only worsened. So he told the team, they went to the hospital. He says he feels better now, but right now what he's going to retire because what he felt with his heart was one of the scariest things he's ever experienced. He spent 15 years in the league, and LaMarcus Aldridge is going to retire after what was a very, very very scary time there for him last weekend.
Yeah, so I mean, according to Basketball Reference, not only is this a guy who's a 7-time All-Star, and certainly took a lot of Portland Trailblazers teams to the playoffs, got the Spurs in, I believe, once, maybe twice, but is also a guy who made almost $196 million in his career. He was a max level player and was just on the tail end of this. So as a 35-year-old, and if you got kids and you got a family and you've made your money, the tough part for LaMarcus, like, he goes to Brooklyn clearly, after getting bought out by the Spurs, as a ring chaser. He was looking for that championship. But I think it does speak to the character of the man a little bit too, for him to go, I've got a family, I've made my money, I've done my thing in the NBA, and yeah, a ring is a ring, but my health comes first, my family comes first. Like, I can't say anything bad against that. And even if he had been 25 years old and made that choice, I think it would have been a more difficult choice because the money you'd be leaving on the table. But you really can't fault a guy when they do that. And it goes back, I think you and I talked about this with the Chris Bosh situation a long time ago. It goes back to the true reality of things, that your career is so unpredictable, and you can be on top of the world as an all-star player, but you're still a human being. And yeah, an injury could come along and take it away, but some freak health thing like this could be taken away. Just, think of Karis LeVert, right? LeVert was staring down the barrel, and this is a guy who's had multiple ACL tears before, so he's stared down that barrel about a career being over anyway. But then with his issue on his kidney, like, you're staring down the barrel of the reality that I may never play basketball again. And I can't remember if Aldridge has had a heart issue before. I feel like he had a while ago. Like, this is not the first time it's come up, but I can't confirm that, and I didn't see anything written about it. But I feel like back in the Portland day, there was some test or something that he failed too, and was already like under testing for this. But I can't remember if I'm just making that up.
He underwent a procedure to test the electrical system in his heart.
Okay.
Back in 2000. Well, so Aldridge was diagnosed with Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome in 2007.
Okay.
Underwent a procedure then, and then in 2011 underwent another procedure to sort of test his the electrical status of his system in his heart.
Yeah. So, and there again, this is a guy who, that means, has dealt with it, right? He's had to think about this. He's had to deal with not only the tests and all the insecurity and uncertainty that comes from that sort of thing, but has probably run that simulation through in his mind plenty of times to go, think what's about, the moment that I got to be done, right? Or the moment that I could be dead, right?
So that's 14 years ago. Like, that's as soon as he got into the league, right?
Yeah.
That he was sort of diagnosed with that and sort of figured it out. Think about what that's like, sort of living with that, right? Like, probably when you're younger, you probably think you got the best medical staff in the world with the NBA. You're probably going to be fine.
And you've got goals in front of you, right?
Sure.
I want to provide for not only my family, but my extended family. I want to create a legacy for my kids.
You haven't made that max sort of money yet.
Yeah,
like, you're getting there. You're sort of getting there. And like you said, you can understand, like, the normal wear and tear injuries, the knees, the ankles, the ACLs.
That's the cost of doing business, right?
The Achilles, the arms, the elbows, whatever. Then you go what he went through a couple of times with heart procedures and being diagnosed with that syndrome. And then 15 years later, like, after a game, like, you experience heart palpitations like that. Like, that's a different type of scary to sort of try to you're like, listen, I know there's only a little bit of time left in the season, and this is the perfect opportunity for me to win a ring, but I don't know if it's worth it. And by the way, I think if Brooklyn wins, I think they're giving him a ring. So like,
I would hope so. I mean, he only appeared in 5 games, but I would hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, like it was going to be on the team for the rest of the year. They were going to,
and their starting center too. I mean, he had started all 5 games he appeared in.
Yeah, he was going to be a piece of that team. So if they end up winning the title, I'm really confident they're going to give him a ring anyway. But to have it be, what would I say, 35 years old, like to have that kind of reality set in for me when you're like 21 and now 35, it's like that's a little scary. I can see wanting to bow out because that's not the normal cost of doing business stuff. That's the heart, that's the head, that's the brain kind of stuff like that you really, really get concerned about.
Yeah, and the first thing I thought of, again, as an outsider to this, when you hear heart palpitations, and again, my memory was really fuzzy on whether he had issues before. You go, oh, well, was he having a panic attack? Panic attacks are scary, and they can feel like life and death, and I'm not diminishing those at all. And players are human beings too, and they'll talk about that having, come up plenty of times, and you go, well, is that what's going on? That, maybe a little odd for a 35-year-old vet and that sort of thing, but that was my first thought. And then as you dig into it a little more, like, oh, no, this is more serious, and you go, yep, I understand. And I don't think somebody could fault him for sitting out time and getting tests and playing, but I don't think you can fault him either for saying, yeah, you know what? I've done what I needed to do in my career, and this isn't worth it. So, I mean, hats off on a very successful career. You talk about what will Aldridge's legacy be as a guy who averaged 20 points a game multiple times in his career, only averaged double-digit rebounds twice. He was one of his generation's best front court scorers and is a guy that had a patented move. Like, it's not as sexy as Tim Hardaway's crossover dribble or the Dirk flamingo shot or, whatever, but it was just as unstoppable. LaMarcus Aldridge with the turn over the left shoulder fadeaway jump shot from mid-range is one of the most unstoppable shots of this era. He didn't always get a lot of credit for that because he was playing in Portland, a small market. Then he's in San Antonio, a small market. But it was a devastating shot. LaMarcus Aldridge did prove more than once that he could not be your best player on your team if you were going to be a contender. But once Damian Lillard came into the picture in Portland, you saw how good he could be as a number 2. And he gets to San Antonio a little bit late. He had to be the number 1 guy there, for a little bit. And then DeRozan is there, and they're both kind of on the tail end of their career. And San Antonio's in a weird transition time where their young guys are not quite ready to step up, but they're not willing to tank as a team either. And he was a part of that and a little bit of a victim of that, but still a productive player. And it is too bad because I think we would have gotten to see LaMarcus Aldridge in those smaller minutes on a team that's definitely chasing a ring, and to be in those big moments, and people might appreciate him as that savvy vet a little more because they wouldn't have seen him as much as a Spur or a Blazer. And we don't get to see that. But again, is that more important in somebody's life or even just their peace of mind? No, it's not. So great career. And we're sorry that, that it ended this way, but I think he probably made the right choice.
I think we make the right choice to put the bow on this episode, the Hilton Armstrong episode. I think we have done him, and I think LaMarcus proud too. So Joel, I think that was another good pod put fresh in the oven for the peeps to hear now.
Yeah, and we gave Hilton Armstrong 5 good minutes of airtime, which I doubt has happened in a long time for Hilton Armstrong, at least stateside, but
combined ever.
Well, maybe draft day. Again, there was a lot riding on that, but you're right. Yep. So yeah, fantastic show. Glad to be able to be back here and do that. And Wednesday we'll be doing the short version of the show, the BbA Bite. And again, if you're listening to us on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts, you can check out the YouTube version. And if you're on YouTube and need audio only, I just told you where you can find your podcast because it's everywhere. We are everywhere.
We is everywhere. We is, Joel. Joel, say goodbye to the good people.
Goodbye, good people.